All right, this is the 2025 Cocodona 250 preview back on short rest with Brett Hornig and Leah Yingling. We were just previewing the Canyons 100K, and I think we just reached a point where it's just busy at the end of April. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. I personally debated doing one of these last year, and I was just sort of planning around the last minute and wondering if I was even going to make it to the start line of the race. So didn't get to the media side of things, but I personally think we've gotten to the point where Cocodona is absolutely worth covering. I'm not sure if you two feel the same, but maybe we start there. Leah, I mean, you were technically on the start line for a minute.
I was on the start list. I was on the start list probably until about 6 weeks ago, whenever Jamil and I had a phone conversation, and I was like, I have to tell you something. And I was really excited for it. Looking back, gosh, I'm just even like glancing at people's training as we were preparing for this interview. I'm like, do I like running enough to be doing the training that these people are doing? And I think I do. I think I would like train probably a little bit differently than some of the people lining up have. But gosh, like you mentioned, Finn, I do think it has increased in competitiveness over the last few years, especially. But the more you dig into it, the more you see that there are truly like 200-mile specialists on the start line on both the men and women's field. And they're people that you don't even see line up at the races that we cover all the time, the Golden Ticket races, Western States, UTMB, things like that. It's almost like this entirely different category of humans that we're seeing here. However, we are starting to see a bit more crossover. And that's where I think it's really exciting and very difficult to predict.
Leah, let me ask you this, because you bring up an interesting point. I think you had expressed some concern there about just how much work you have to put into a training block to be successful here. I was going to tell you that one of my new thoughts is that you could actually probably carry over a relatively low, for example, 60 to 70 mile per week, peak week type training block into this thing and still be at the front competing. But it sounds like you might.
I agree with you there. And
Okay.
not that I've done this at all, but I think that is how I would personally approach it, from like a showing up undertrained, not overtrained perspective, and just the enjoyment factor. And I think being able to simulate as much as I could during training without having to tap into those 6+ hour training days, day after day after day, like we see some people put in.
Leah, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Did you defer your entry to another year, or are you just like a Jamil, I'll let you know?
Yeah, it was a mix of both. So my registration, like, I can put it towards the cost towards a future year. So I'm sure Cocodona will inherently go up in price over the years. So I have like this registration money will go towards that. So, and Jamil, we're buds. So I could probably get in when I want to.
To set the table for this episode, I just want to list out our collective experience in this scene. Brett was commandeering the 12 to 6 p.m. slot daily on the 2023 live stream, so saw a pretty historical race go down, the pre-running era, as I like to call it.
Yes.
And then also one of the main crew people on Leah's Further project. I was on the live stream with you in 23, having a blast, and then raced it last year. And Leah, you've obviously followed the race, and then you ran 400 miles in 6 days.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it was on day 2 or 3 of my 400 miles that I texted Jamil and said, sign me up for Cocodona next year. So
I think it was because you had hit 250 miles, and I don't know if it was like me or Mike. We were like, hey, you're, I forget how many hours it was, like under the Cocodona course record.
yeah.
That's kind of cool.
I'm like, sign me up.
Leah, from your experience at Further, I know we did an episode on this a year-ish ago, but now that the dust has settled and you've started to put together a thesis around what it takes to be successful at these multi-day races, in addition to sort of like the weekly training we just covered, what else comes to mind for you about how you prep for a race like Cocodona?
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is that multi-day races can be very, 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 very different. So when you think about these like 6-day races that occur on a 1-mile loop or on a track, just so vastly different from what you're seeing at Cocodona, Bigfoot, like what we're about to see at Mammoth 200 this year. like Moab 240. I think those races are just like an entirely different subset, because the track ones you can have a bit more control and like standardization around. I think these ones still feel like the Wild West in some ways, where like you need to come to the table with through hiking, like problem solving experience, or and if you don't, just like really masterful problem solving experience, independence, and like you've mentioned many times recently, Finn, like speed. It's getting a bit faster, and you can't be expected to win or podium with just true hiking in these races.
Yeah, I think one of the things that always gets me with Cocodona in terms of like trying to put myself in the shoes of anyone racing is, for me, like the remoteness, or like because further was 6 days, it was a lot of miles, but like Leah, you got to see your crew every lap. You know, we could make like fine tweaks to things like every lap if you wanted to, or you would run by and you're just like, I'll catch you in the next one. Just the thought of like the solo problem solving that needs to happen like at some point in the middle of the night, when I'm like, I've got an aid station like 6 miles behind me and 6 miles in front of me, really then does cater to the person who has more of like an experience through hiking, multi-day type background, which is something where I'd be like I know how to run, but like I don't know how to do any of that other stuff.
Yeah, I think too, these races just emphasize this level of preparation and support that are required to do your best. Like, you need just complete due diligence when it comes to the little things, and like planning things the best you can for how you foresee yourself needing support at mile 100, at mile 150, at 200. And that's really hard, because you could be dealing with a whole slew of issues, from like heat mitigation issues to absolutely horrendous feet to not being able to keep nutrition down. So you're almost like predicting this wide variety of things and hoping to prepare well for those wide variety of things, and asking your crew to be your emotional, mental, physical support in those moments too, for the vast majority of things that you're going to be experiencing, which I think is really tough, is accruing just the prep that's appropriate, but also like the crew that's going to support you the best too.
We are coming off a really interesting, I would call it, watershed moment in this race. The 2024 edition was interesting both on the men's and women's sides. There was a film that just came out a week or two ago called The Chase, which takes sort of an Unbreakable-esque approach to following. It was Arlene Glick, Jeff Browning, Michael Versteeg, Michael McKnight, and Joe McConaughey, as well as Harry Subertis, in sort of their fight for the victory there last year. Brett, you were telling me offline you just finished watching it and learned a ton about the race. Going into this year's edition, like, what were some of the takeaways from the movie?
Yeah, so I literally did just finish watching it like 30 minutes ago.
Breaking news.
I mean, and it was in a couple chunks, because I haven't had an hour 50 to myself that's like not running or sleeping in a year now. So that's why it took a little bit of time, but I did it. And one of the biggest takeaways was, well, it was a mix. So it was like the level of professionalism that got brought to the race last year, where we had like Jeff, Joe, Versteeg as well, just a like full sponsor, like Arlen, like, I'm a professional ultra runner. Like, I have a contract with this company, like this brand. Like, if I win this race, I'm going to get paid. I guess even if I don't, I'm still getting paid, which is even more professional. That many people lining up to this race, where they all had the one goal of like, I'm going to win this, and then looking and be like, oh yeah, I believe that. Like, I could see every single one of you winning this race. Normally, it seemed like in the previous few years, there was maybe 2 people where it's like, you're winning this race and you're like, okay, I believe you that you can win this race. It just is, there's more people now that I believe could win this race. And then that ultimately only makes it harder to race or to win. And the other big takeaway that I had was just that, yeah, I think we still are in the era where you can make some mistakes and you can wing it a little bit. Like as we've quoted Joe McConaughey in the past saying like 200s are, like, or like 100 miles, we're getting pretty figured out. Like 200s, we're like starting to get a little figured out, but still mostly like voodoo witchcraft. And it does seem that the racing is still very largely intuition based, but it seems like every year we've seen a little bit more science, a little bit more accurate planning get thrown into the training leading up to the race as well as the race itself. And just the mistakes that you make out there have bigger impacts. Like smaller mistakes have bigger impacts. They used to be like a smaller mistake, it didn't even matter. It wasn't even considered a mistake. It was just considered a part of running 200 miles. But now, like last year, there was many times where Joe tried to take a 10-minute nap and he could not fall asleep. So then he's like, well, crap. Now I just laid there with my eyes closed for 10 minutes. Did that do anything? Did that not? Am I going to have to try this again in an hour? And it's like, normally that's like, well, that's just how 200s go. But it's like, no, like now if you want to win the race, if you're going to sleep for 10 minutes and you call that shot, like you better like kind of clutch, lay it in and actually go to sleep for 10 minutes.
I have a couple questions on that, Brett. Do you think it's possible to practice that type of like quick nap anywhere in training or in life for prep to like get ready for that
I know,
scenario?
It's like that's kind of what we were talking about right before we hit record, where I said like one of the biggest limiting factors for me was like you two have both covered so much farther distance in one go than I have. Like I'm 100 miles, like at the very top. Like Leah, you're 400. Finn, you've got a Cocodona, you've got an Appalachian Trail. Like you at least know what the extreme fatigue feels like. Like Leah, you know what like a short or a long sleep does. So like you would be able to make a little bit more educated guess going into Cocodona, like what kind of sleeps you get. I have a little idea just from crewing you, but at the same time, like I was also always getting like 4 hours at least during the middle of the day before pulling the overnight shift. So and then practicing, it's like, how do I get to that point where I practice it other than just like hopping into like a 48-hour event or something?
Yeah.
Like how many matches does that burn?
I'm thinking about the discomfort. Like I love sleeping so much and I hate waking up so much. So it's almost like I would want to train that mental side of having my alarm set for like 2:30 in the morning. And then I just have to go out and run like 5 miles around my neighborhood and then come back. And then maybe I can like treat myself to some sleep, but just to like disrupt myself where I'm like being completely pleasant and then go do something that I don't really want to do, because I think that's the feeling that is the toughest hurdle to overcome, is that like awaking yourself and like getting back out there efficiently and then just moving your body. Because I think once you're moving for like the first 10 minutes of that, then you just get in that rhythm again and it's actually totally fine.
So the Instagram algorithm has been feeding me this ad for a product, but multiple brands of the product. And they're like,
is this your best internet find of the week right here?
Well, no, it's like a potential sleep hack brain blast.
Oh, what is it?
And it's like, so, like Zyn, like the nicotine, like not chewing tobacco, but it's like synthetic ones, like super in right now. And like, they're supposed to make you all energetic. There's all these companies that are making like non-nicotine versions of that, where they're just like energy pouches that you just freaking gum it. And it's like, dude, what if and the ingredients in some of these are just like such long words. And I was like, dude, I have no idea what any of these are. But what if I did enough digging and I found one that actually had like some good science behind it for like legit energy? Because just the idea of like being able to just like open up my tin and just like pop one of those in and just like subdermally get like 3 hours of energy, like I don't know, it's like
subdermally.
I would love to get some subdermal
energy. Like, super lightweight, like there's not any liquid. You don't have to chew any gum. I don't have to drink like a bunch of coffee, because like coffee is really acidic, and like I don't always like, like I don't envision myself enjoying taking down like a caffeinated gel, 40 hours into Cocodona. But it's like, what if I can just like tuck a little energy pillow in my bottom lip?
You're onto
I don't know.
something.
I don't know. I
That's
think
the next frontier, I think.
yeah. Thank you, Instagram algorithm. Might be a
That's
thing.
amazing.
Might be a thing. Finn, you could just you just pioneer this one.
I've been thinking of some pretty exotic options. Like I was trying to get a hold of smelling salts,
Oh my god.
and it's actually turns out they're kind of hard to get.
Well, because they like knock you on your ass if you're like not an experienced salt smeller.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I can take down ketones, I can take down smelling salts.
Oh.
I don't know. I mean, I've never smelled like legit smelling salts. Have you like gotten knocked out and woken
No,
up by them?
I had a friend that used them once on an FKT attempt and swears by them.
Interesting.
But
Wow.
I guess it's like a 15-minute window of really extreme bounce back, and then you
Oof.
go back to wherever you were. So
worth it. Yeah, probably
yeah,
not
you'd have
worth
to
it.
re-up.
Yeah. So you give me my synthetic
Yes.
non-nicotine of synthetic nicotine of
Yeah.
dip.
I'll say two things, and this is based on limited experience. With trying to sleep last year, I found that, and I think it's different for everyone, there is a very fine line between restorative sleep and then that sleep where when you wake up from it, your body now thinks that whatever you're doing is over, and it gets into this extreme recovery mode. You kind of get mummified almost, like your legs, and you feel like you just got hit by a dump truck. And I do think that could start anywhere from 30 minutes into a sleep or an hour and a half. It kind of depends on the person. I also found that instead of planning sleep or like saying, I'm going to go to this aid station and I'm just going to try right here, for me, like just honoring whenever I was having like any fatigue or just like sleep pressure in my brain, I would just right there on the trail, just pull off to the side and sleep for 5 minutes. And that worked wonders.
Did you feel like that was, you know how whenever you're drinking and you need to pee and you're like, I'm just going to hold off for as long as possible, and people are like, don't break the seal. Do you feel like you break the seal of sleeping at all, where like once you take your first little nap, your body's like, give me more, I need more?
I do think there's some truth to that, because I made it all the way to Sedona, had to take my first dirt nap, and then 17 miles later needed a bigger nap, and then with Caleb fell asleep at the base of Eldon for a little bit too. And so like the frequency just increased. So there could be that, but there does come a point, at least for me, where like the sleep pressure in my head is so much that I have to like honor it. Another thing about the chase though that I wanted to say, and this was one of my biggest takeaways, because we're coming off a Canyons 100K race that we didn't recap, but we can talk a little bit about it if we want. So much carnage in that race, especially in the men's field, right? Crazy. Yeah. And I would assume, not knowing much about 200-mile races, that like there would be exponentially more carnage in a race like Cocodona, just like more miles, more days, more time for mistakes, more carnage. And what was crazy about last year's race was the durability of the placement of that men's top six, for example. Other than Killian Korth, Jeff Garmeyer, Versteeg, McConaughey, Browning, Glick, Harry, they all like hung around. There was some swapping of places, but they basically hung around in that 1 through 6 spot. It was durable from like Crown King onward for 2 days. And I don't know if we're ever going to see that again, but that I was so expecting a massive shakeup, and it really never happened.
Yeah, like, do you think that's going to be the norm for like 200-mile races that we're about to figure out, or if that was like lightning in a bottle type year? Because like there's a lot of studies around just impact forces at higher paces versus slower paces. Like, you know, a lot of people, like, there's always like the 100-pound female runner who's like a size 7. She was like, oh, well, she can go 9,000 miles. And well, if she's a 225 marathoner, you know, and she's, you know, running 6-7 minute pace for a lot of races, like the impact forces of that are going to be greater than someone who's like significantly larger, running a lot slower, just because of the physics behind that. So it's like, maybe that's still why we're seeing a huge amount of blow ups at a race like Canyons, but not as much in a race like Cocodona.
That, I think that makes a lot of sense. Where I was going to go with it was more like psychological. And I feel like the longer the race, perhaps, this is just a theory, perhaps the longer the race, the more grace and ease the runners give themselves to make mistakes and believe that they can bounce back from them. Whereas maybe at a race like Canyons, relatively shorter race, they're really operating at crazy margins. And if they feel like they have fallen behind or taken a fall, gotten injured, whatever, they might lose a lot more willpower than Jeff Browning does if he runs into like bronchial issues at mile 180.
So
there's just maybe a
Yeah.
better chance of follow through at longer distances.
I think so too. And another thought I'm thinking of is just like Cocodona requires a lot of training. All these 200s require a lot of training, a lot of commitment, usually from a pretty large support team. And then more often than not, we're seeing people who have experience at the distance come perform here. And it might be, this might be one of the major goals of the season. Whereas at a race like Canyons, the like excuse we hear a lot of the times is, I pulled the plug, I'm saving myself for something later in the season. And I feel like people who are lining up for Cocodona are more likely people who are going to see a whole effort through, if I had to guess.
Yeah. It's like it's an A race because it's like a standalone,
and it's expensive.
Okay, wait, Finn, I got a question for you. Since we're on the topic of like running and efficiency for this. So, okay, why didn't Arlen Glick win the race last year? Like after watching the chase, like he was running so well in like the last third, and like he was just gobbling up time. Like he was eating into like what they were saying, like 20 minutes between every single aid station for the last like I don't know 75 miles. So did he just like go out too conservative? Like why didn't he win the race? Because he was like probably by all means the best runner in that race.
I have a couple theories. So, and I think there are some podcasts out there that he's been on since to recap it, and I haven't listened yet. But one of the features of Cocodona is I think 2/3 of the climbing of the entire race happens on day one. And like Arlen was on record saying he was looking forward to just like making it through that section to get to the runnable parts the rest of the race. And if you go back to the chase, he's already 15 minutes behind the lead pack heading into Crown King. So 50K into the race, he's 15 minutes back. At that point, that's 1.5 miles to 2 miles back. And then he spends the next 40 miles just like in this bubble where he sees no other runners. And I think there was just this like culture happening at the front between Harry, Jeff, Versteeg, Joe McConaughey. Like they kind of could like see each other down the road, so to speak. Like they were in touch, and that factor was just like pushing them at a slightly faster clip. And I think he just lost time. And then, I mean, also probably didn't benefit from the fact that like there wasn't as much of a drop off as anyone expected. In the second half, there's like no one really fell back to him. The only person that fell back to him was Versteeg.
Yeah.
And McConaughey.
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
So I think you have to stay in touch. Like I think if anyone this year is looking, whether it's the men's race or the women's race or the overall race, because I have a feeling with the predictions, I have a feeling that Courtney's going to dictate this race across genders. You have to be willing to play the game. I think the race starts at the start line, even at Cocodona.
So then like, what's the limit for not letting someone go? Like, you know, Canyons 100K this past weekend. What was it? Jackson Cole. Jackson Cole was like charging hard down Deadwood, and it seemed like a lot of people did let him go, and then he did come back.
So I was just listening to the Free Trail recap, and I'd be curious to hear what you guys think about this. But or maybe it was the Boulder Boys episode, but Matt Daniels has a really good quote, and he's like, you know, a lot of times that first 5 to 10K of a race is just like shaking off the pretenders. And then like you really see who deserves to be up at the front of the race. And I think if you're somebody at Cocodona that's trying to be in contention, I think you have to, at a certain point, you have to have an honest conversation with yourself. Like, is this actually what I'm capable of? Like, am I this type of runner? Or like, should I honor the limits of my physiology and training and like hang back? And if that means that, you know, whatever, I'm in 15th place the rest of the day or stuff falls back to me, great. But like, I think you have to like know who you are as a runner.
Is there anyone in this field where like if someone takes off and then this next person covers that move, like you trust them enough to the point where it's like a non-negotiable, like I am not letting this person go? Is there anyone in this field where you're like that confident in their just like what's the word, like awareness?
I think there's going to be, I am predicting a lot of carnage this year. I think there's a lot of mania. I think there's a lot of pressure to upkeep last year's breakthroughs. And just listening to like Versteeg talk about how this year he's ready to like go and like try even harder and really race at the front. Hearing Jeff Garmeyer say he's in the best shape of his life. I just think there's a lot of guys that have prepared them. Michael McKnight is running more. Like I think people are going to be way bigger risk takers this year. So I'm very worried.
Yeah, that will be. Yeah, you have some decision making.
Yeah, a thought that crossed my mind with this is with Cocodona, with all the other 200 milers, we saw, let's call it 5 years ago, that like if you performed well across one or multiple 200 milers, you could kind of make a name for yourself in the sport. We saw that happen with Mike McKnight, with Annie Hughes, kind of defined who they were for a few years stint. Do you think that is still possible?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, that is the first mover advantage, right? Like if you're the first to a space, you get to reap so many of the riches. It's amazing. Like it pays to be a pioneer sometimes. I still think you can. I mean, we were talking about this offline. Like I would argue that like one of the reasons why I'm attracted to Cocodona for many reasons, but I would argue one of the reasons why it's so enticing is, with the exception of people like Courtney in this race and maybe like Harry Subertes, for people that are like front of the middle of the packers or back of the front of the packers, there's this like sense of possibility that you could never get at Canyons or Black Canyon or Western States. Like those days are long gone. And so like, I think it's exciting to think that like anything could happen. Like you could have your day and like the rest of the sport hasn't caught up yet. Like people are still mostly focusing in hundreds and below. I think it's going to change super quickly. Like Courtney's already here, right? And she's been here for a while. But like, yeah, I'm, as someone who fits that mold, like I'm hanging on to these days until they're gone.
Yeah. So where are the people like you gonna go once science hits 200s?
300s.
Oh man, we're just gonna. Hey, if we're good at finding relevance, we'll find a way.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the next frontier of voodoo witchcraft is and endurance sport.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the course. I'll do a quick overview, and if you guys have questions or comments to layer in, let me know. Overhead numbers, 250 miles, about 38,000 feet of climbing. Most of that climbing happens on day one. I think what makes Cocodona interesting from a course standpoint is Jamil has sort of built this race in the mold of a classic European style thing where, yes, there is that sense of remoteness and wilderness that you described, Brett, but also you have this awesome integration along the way with cities and towns, Crown King, Prescott, Jerome, Sedona, Munns Park, Flag, Fort Tuttle, etc. That's really cool. It's really interesting. Like in the first 75 miles of the race, which is basically all of day one for the front, you see your crew one time at Crown King and then again at mile 70 at Whiskey Row. So there's this sense of self-reliance and managing yourself that becomes really important. And then as the race progresses, you get to lean on crew, pacers, the field around you, more frequent stops. But it's really interesting that interplay between like self-reliance and then a ton of support, I think makes this race super interesting. I think there's really like 4 major theaters on this course. First is the climb into the Bradshaws. It's that famous 50K section where like you're really alone. You have to carry way too much gear, especially water. You get there, and then your next big climb is Mingus, and then getting up from Sedona onto the Coconino Plateau, and then up Eldon. So basically 4 climbs. If you're at the front of the race, you are in those valleys in the heat of the day. So there's this like topical cooling, heat management aspect to it that's crazy. And at night, you're at the top of these climbs, freezing your butt off. So again, like it's kind of a tale of two cities, Jekyll and Hyde type course, but really engaging, really different along the way. Like what you see at mile 10 is so different geographically than what you see on the Coconino Plateau, heading into Kelly Canyon. It's insane. And yeah, I think for the most part, I think it's a race that benefits someone who has legs, who's a runner, but there's also this piece of like raw survival in the first day that gives people that might not have the best physical tools in that arena a fighting chance to stay in the mix, especially if the runners like an Arlen Glick don't manage themselves well in that day one experience. So
Do you
That's how I would describe it.
do you find that it's easy to manage yourself on day one? Like you talked about the periods where you don't see your crew, but in terms of aid station support, I assume that there are decent aid stations between those spots. Did it feel well supported in such a way that if you're somebody who is on top of all those controllables, you could do a very good job of managing?
It's a super fine line because basically the race offers one full aid station at mile 7, and then there are these, by no fault of the races, just shaky water stops where they may or may not have a liter of water to give you. Last year, for example, the mile 24 water stop, there was a vandal that came in, dumped all the tanks, and we basically got nothing. And that was for the front of the race. So really it is this like wild through hike. You gain about 11,000 feet of climbing in the process, super hot, super exposed. It's really tough. And also it matters how much you've tested your gear and dialed it in the lead up. I looked like a cyborg. I had all these straws coming out of me from every which way. And like I had multiple gear failures. I think I was carrying 12 pounds of water to begin with and ended up consuming maybe 2 pounds of it because everything broke on me. So like I wasn't hydrating properly. My gear wasn't working and I wasn't shedding weight that I had anticipated shedding. So it's like, it really is this like PhD level test of like, of all your time in the sport of ultra running, have you gotten to this point where you can manage yourself psychologically, you've picked the right gear and you can just execute? I would have given myself like a D plus, and I was really lucky to, but you know what? D's get degrees.
I thought it was C's get degrees. What schools did y'all go to?
I went to a state school, man. D's totally get degrees.
The only other race where I've really heard that you need to have like a PhD level of kind of just like skill behind you is Hard Rock. And even though they're two wildly different courses, there are actually a lot of parallels to this race and Hard Rock. Just with kind of like, you are very remote. At the same time, though, you get to go through like a couple major towns at Hard Rock. There's a decent amount of aid help, but like sometimes you go a pretty long time without seeing your crew and you like really got to figure some shit out on your own.
I don't want to scare people though, because if you do have everything dialed, it is one of the most beautiful sections of the course. Like if you actually have yourself so prepared that you can actually look around and smell the roses while you're ascending to Crown King, it's amazing. Like if I wasn't suffering so much and making so many mistakes, what I would have paid attention to instead is like how remarkable the area is. Like it's beautiful. And I think that's an undertold sort of story of it. Like rightfully so, people like add the fear factor to it because if you make a mistake, you're screwed. And people's days do end at Crown King or shortly after, but like it's incredible.
So, okay, well, here's a question then. As the front of the race gets more competitive and it gets more important to stay attached to that front of the race, we're ultimately going to start seeing more and more people at the front of the race gambling a little bit on their gear. Like one of the biggest eye openers in like the front of any race for me was when I was like just getting into ultras in 2015, watching Rob Krar win Western States. He was wearing yellow shorts, Nike Lunar Racers, and he had one like 18-ounce bottle just tucked in behind the shorts because he knew that if he like, and he would, every time like he was at an aid station or saw his crew, he would just force feed himself like 24 ounces of Rob Krar's secret stuff and then get a small bottle knowing that if he stayed exactly on like winning splits, he would empty that bottle by the next aid station with like zero room for error. When we're talking you starting with 12 pounds of water and only drinking 2, but they're also like maybe not getting water in some of those water stops. The person who gambles and starts with less and gets lucky on the water stops having water is going to carry a significant amount less weight up to Crown King, but they're taking a huge gamble because what if you had done that and then you were like running dry as you got up to the spot and there was like 6 drops, but like, are we to a point now where that is what you need to do to win this race, or is there still a little bit of wiggle room?
So we do have a slight case study here because the very first year of Cocodona, the first 50K hasn't changed that much. The first year of Cocodona, the race just simply didn't know what they didn't know. And there was only a 3-liter water carrying requirement for that section. Wow. And so you had people like Pete Mortimer and Mike Versteeg, I think Jeff Garmeyer, Whit Weisbrand, that whole group, like, yeah, they carried maybe 2 liters, maybe 3 liters. And like, I guess technically they survived that section, but there's that like doc that Dylan Harris made about the first inaugural year. And like, everyone is just roasted by the time they get to Lane Mountain. And like, so I agree. Like at some point we're going to figure out some equation for like minimum viable carry and nutrition for that section. I'll be the first to say I haven't figured it out. And like, I am definitely like going with more. Like I'm going 10% over probably just to make sure I get what I need nutritionally, hydrationally.
I think that's smart. You talked a little bit about the first year of Cocodona. There's been several iterations since, and the course has changed a little bit over time. Can you talk about this year's course and then as it compares to like the historic times and like the fastest times we've seen on the course, and how the course has changed a smidge over the years?
Yeah, a couple interesting, I would say the most interesting change this year is that there are a few pacerless sections on day 2 and day 3 for the front of the field. So basically last year and years before, from Whiskey Row onward, you could sort of rest easy knowing that you would have a pacer with you from there to the finish.
Wow.
And because of some permitting issues, I think with it's like the spotted owl, like protected species on the Cocodona Plateau, for example, there's a section, I think it's Fort Tuttle to Walnut Canyon. That's like mile 213 to 229. You have to do this 16-mile section on your own. There's also no aid station there. So it's like a 16-mile no aid section without pacers. And like, I remember last year, at least in my case, I had a pacer, super critical. We made it through great, but like, it was because they were cracking the whip and like making decisions for me. And I was totally just like, I was the horse, right? And they were just like making sure I got there. So I think that adds a really interesting dilemma to the mix of like, again, you have to go back to that day one mindset of managing yourself properly.
Yeah.
The climb out of Sedona last year was up a mountain called Kasner, which was a brutal climb. There was a river crossing there too. Beautiful, but brutal, really overgrown, stuff like that. They have since moved that. You still climb out of Sedona, but I can't think of the name of the trail, but you go to Foxborough Ranch. But I think this climb allegedly has some exposure to it. And it is also pacerless. So you're going up this climb out of Sedona, and there are some like holds and elements to it where it's like not quite full on like rock climbing, but like pay attention. So yeah, having the presence of mind and having that like sense of independence and, you know, wherewithal to get through that stuff back to your crew safely adds an interesting mix. You can't totally be reckless.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think a lot of things stay the same. There might be like slight movements in where aid stations are placed, but it's mostly durable. But yeah, the pacerless thing. Oh, forgot about Eldon. Yeah, so the Eldon last year, you would hike up basically the south face of it, pretty technical, but it was switchbacked, steep. And then you would have a ramp-esque downhill to Heritage Square and Flag. This year, again, because of permitting issues, because of protected species stuff, they've reversed it. So you're going up the ramp, like your climb is easier, but then you're descending down this like super technical, steep, rocky trail to finish. So again, like presence of mind, paying attention, focus.
That's really interesting because I feel like from following the live stream last year, if you had legs towards the end, I mean, quote unquote legs, you could roll on that section. And I feel like, honestly, hiking up this douche grade climb for miles and miles sounds honestly more difficult to me at mile 240 than just head down hiking up a steep slope.
Yeah.
For sure.
I'm worried. Like definitely the last 75 miles are like demonstrably more difficult in a lot of ways. I have no idea how I'm going to descend off Eldon safely. We'll see.
So
I'll be really curious to see what happens.
Use your black diamond poles instead of your Leckies.
Yeah, Finn is notorious for breaking at least one pair of trekking poles a year. I'm pretty sure.
Dude, bring your strong poles for the descent off.
I might bring ski poles.
Yeah, maybe you'll find some up there.
You should bring all the poles that you have that don't have a match right now, which is
Just
probably like 5 pairs.
tape them together.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, for the few course changes around Sedona, I mean, it sounds like the Eldon section's definitely slower. What about the Sedona section, and does that make the entire course slower?
I still, and again, I know we'll get into it for both fields. I still think it's basically the same course. I don't think it's going to affect times crazily. I don't know, maybe having no pacers slows things down a little bit, because I do think pacers are a huge advantage in multi-day. But I think like that Sedona switch is kind of a 1-for-1, pretty neat. If anything, maybe slightly faster. But then the Eldon thing might slow things down a little bit. So to me, like the way I'm looking at it, it's not changing my splits at all. I'm planning to, I'm basically treating it like last year's course.
I was just going to ask about, because we're a week out from the start of the race.
Yeah.
I was just popping open. I was about to ask what the weather's like, but like that's a very long question, because the weather at the start and the middle and the end are very different.
It's
But
like 6 days of weather.
yeah, I didn't pull up the start. I pulled up flag.
Okay.
Oh, well, we don't actually have, I don't have extended forecasts enough here on Google for flag, because I can only see Monday. I need more than that. Monday in Flagstaff, though, shows a mixture of rain and snow. Not funny. Jerome looks perfect for Monday, like upper 40s, 50s,
Guys,
a little clouds.
Guys, this is insane. I just pulled up Black Canyon City for Monday, race start. Historically cold, 68 degrees.
Dude.
What the heck?
68.
How are you getting lucky with your Cocodona years?
But that's lucky. See, the desert rat in me is like, well, crap, if it's perfect weather in the warmest part, that means it's going to be so cold for a long time. Like, I don't know how I would comprehend a dirt nap when it's like 38 degrees. But like, like Finn, you tolerate the cold much better than I do. But like, I could fall asleep in the sun if it was 100 degrees out.
So last year, the day before the race at Packet Pickup, Black Canyon City, you guys know the location, Bumblebee Ranch area, there was like a windstorm. It was like 25-mile-an-hour winds. They could barely keep the tents down, dust everywhere, crazy. We're looking at the same thing. Sunday's going to be 68 degrees, 18-mile-per-hour south by southwest wind.
Interesting.
That's the cold front. So that's bringing the cold front in. And then Monday, allegedly, high point of sub 70 degrees.
Wow.
Ooh, it's supposed to warm up a little in flag.
Yeah, Wednesday looks warm. Wednesday, I'm just looking at Black Canyon City right now, is 82 is a high and full
That's
sun.
still low, though. That's still super low.
Still is.
Dude, are you about to ride a wave of perfect weather all the way to flag? Because like as you get higher and the weather warms up, it'll still be cool. Because like flag on Wednesday says sunny, low of 36, high of 63.
Pretty nice.
Yeah. Wow. So I have a nutritional consult with Vic Johnson later tonight, and I'm going to have to bring up this whole weather thing. It's like, how does that affect hydration? Like maybe Brett riding that line of like more minimalist gear approach. Does that make me use the Solomon pack instead of the Ultimate Direction Fast Tech?
One bottle, tuck it in your shorts. Fill it with Hammer Recoverite. I think that's what Krar uses, like chocolate Recoverite.
Ugh.
Yeah.
I will say I have remarkable, whether or not I do well in a race, I have remarkable weather luck. I thought the year that we did Western States in 2018, Brett, actually it was hot.
It was really hot.
It was like 108 in the canyons. But
there
was no snow in the high country. That was sick. There was no snow.
I know, because it was like 80 degrees at the high country, like t-shirts at the start.
That was insane. Yeah. But like Trans-Gran Canaria this year was fantastic weather. Like our night was so nice. Not that I benefited from it, but it was super nice.
Okay, well, that's a cool update with the weather.
So yeah, we're recording this exactly. We're Monday, April 28th. Keep that in mind. Things will possibly change, but it looks like a cold front is strategically coming through on Sunday. Going to be super windy at the Packet Pickup. That brings the cold air in. And Monday, and honestly, even Tuesday, it's looking super nice.
Dude, first 50K is going to be so fast. Like, you better bring your start blocks, man.
Oh, man. Okay, we're dumping the Mafate speed. That's totally out of the question now.
You got to spike up.
Should
we talk women's field? Leah, do you want to start us in the women's field?
Yeah. So the women's field is exciting. I think this is probably Courtney's the highlight of the women's field to start off.
Mhm.
We have not seen Courtney Dauwalter at Cocodona yet. She has years of experience at the 200-mile distance, but we haven't seen her revisited in a while. Not sure the exact year of her last attempt, but
What'd she do? 2018 or something?
probably every 200-miler she has touched has turned. She if it turned to gold. She's won them. She's destroyed them. She's crushed like the field, men and women in them. So I think we will 100% expect Courtney to highlight this field. I love Courtney at this distance because I feel like she's alluded to in the past about how this has just made her stronger mentally as she's approached other distances too. So I'm also very curious for the Courtney that comes out of the other side of Cocodona because I think we're starting to see Courtney being challenged a little bit more in this sport, and I'm curious to see like what tools this will give her for future races as well.
I wish I could pull up the article that Matt Walsh wrote about Solomon's like latest stand in trail running and sort of the lengths that they're going to for athletes like Courtney to maintain their longevity in the sport too. Like he got this quote from Scott Mellon, who's the CMO there at Solomon, basically being like, look, our goal is like to make sure that with the 7 more years that we have Courtney signed under this contract, that like she's as healthy as she can be. We're giving her like custom shoes, custom nutrition, like we're treating it like a cycling team would. And like, so it seems like she's also at this point in her career where she's had more resources than ever around her to like stay excellent.
Totally. That's a great point. Yeah, we saw her. Go ahead, Britt.
Oh, so I got her 200-mile results. It was 2018 for Tahoe.
Nice.
200, and then 2017 for Moab 240. But I think what's interesting, so I think that's the extent of her dirt 200 plus mile races. In Moab, she won it outright, and in Tahoe, she got second overall. So like in her 200-mile trail ultra career, she's only lost to one person.
And she only lost by 27 minutes that year in a close to 50-hour race to Kyle Curtin. And I mean, gosh, and that was a battle. I don't know if you guys have seen the documentary on that, but it's a great one to see. And like Courtney had errors. She had low spots. She definitely had her high spots too. But I mean, she beat third place then by 11 hours in that race.
Hey, Jamil, 5th place at that Tahoe 200.
Sick. That's sick. How much stock do you put in Lindsay Dwyer? Because I just pulled up her Strava, and you talk about volume for this race, like the work she has, like her and Max Jolliffe are dueling for like most volume in the league.
Her training terrifies me.
Dude, it's fast too.
It is fast.
So this is what I wrote down for one of my Strava notes. Leah, I bet you have the same exact thing. So two weeks ago, her week was 164.4 miles, and I was convinced that there was a bike ride in that week because
bike ride.
Because it was 164 miles in 25 hours of time with 22,000 feet of vert. It was all running. Like that's a freaking legit week.
Yes. Yeah, I have in my notes, I said, when you're on the desktop version of Strava and you're scrolling through and you see the cumulative week, and then you're hunting for the bike ride.
I was hunting for the bike ride, didn't find it. It blew my freaking mind.
And then I was like, how did she acquire 164 miles in this week? Like, what does that look like? And I think her minimum run, and unless she was doing a double, was like a 16 miles in a day. So it was like
they were big.
Usually 16 to 24 miles a day that she's doing. These are anywhere from like 3 hours to 6 hour runs. And my first question for Lindsay is like, how are you fueling to recover from that? What is your willpower like? And like, has this worked before? Like, I'd be curious. I need to probably like look back at her history a bit more. This is her first 200 miler as far as I can tell. Multiple wins at the 100-mile distance at Burning River, Rio del Lago, the Yeti 100, and ran a very fast 100-miler at Brazos Bend this past December, running 15:42.
And
so she's quick.
And she just had a really good big Alta, like mid 130-mile week. I think she had like 90 miles of running on the week coming into Big Alta, and then got 5th.
Yep, and then ran like 20 some miles the next day.
her deload week in the midst of all this was 18 hours time on feet, 117 miles, 19,000 feet of climbing.
I mean, gosh, it's I'm very curious about what her race plan is.
I've got a little bit of intel. This is interesting. So I believe last year she was trying to get into this race relatively last minute and was either like the last person to not get selected off the wait list, or was like trying to get an elite entry and like something didn't work. It was like whatever, too soon capped or too late capped out, etc. So I have a feeling there is this really like motivating carrot there. It's like, I missed last year's opportunity and like I'm going to make the most out of this. And I mean, yeah, she was doing this in Hong Kong too, Hong Kong and SF. Like she would be traveling like across the world and still getting weeks in.
Oof. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. And like, I think something that speaks to me is like, we see these types of hours of training for runners when usually it's like the male runners that are running UTMB. When we're doing our UTMB preview, we're like, they clocked between like 23 and 27 hours of training this week. And you don't really see that type of like hourly volume from somebody that's doing a lot of runnable stuff. Like a lot of the Marin stuff is pretty buttery that she's been training on. So that's a lot of running to acquire those 164 miles and those 25 hours too.
Yeah, I would be very confident in my body's ability to endure the Cocodona course after a training block like this. Like,
totally.
Like I would, yeah, you're not going to get hurt mid race, barring a fall or anything like that. But like, I wouldn't expect an overuse injury of sorts out of Lindsay Dwyer.
I agree. Yeah. So I had, of my two like headliner people below Courtney Dauwalter, they were the two women who have not done a 200-mile race before, and that's Lindsay Dwyer and then Georgia Porter. This will be Georgia's first 200. However, she did do the Arizona Trail last year, setting the women's FKT on that. So she has experience with long trail style stuff. And we saw her in the last few years, I would say 2021 to 2023 largely, like put herself into some of the most competitive races here in the States, going after golden ticket races, always being competitive in every single race that she was doing, like always podium finisher, unless it was like one of the most competitive races on US soil. Then we saw her in the top 10, which is huge. She's super fast. She came from a kind of like elite marathon running background and then transitioned to trails probably around COVID timeframe. So I kind of like this generation of Georgia over the years of like dabbling, getting expertise, doing it well, and then kind of shifting and moving on a little bit. Also curious to see where she pivots or if she stays in this realm after Cocodona.
Yeah, how many of this like quote unquote next generation of people who are like say debuting or are very new to the 200-mile distance, how many of these runners stay at this distance, or are we going to see more? Like what Courtney did. She did like a year with like 200 miles, but then switched back to hundreds and shorter for a long time before coming back to Cocodona. Like, we see this in like hundreds a lot. Like when like someone who's good at running moves up and like runs a good 100, it seems like they stay at hundreds forever until their career's over. Will we see that with 200s with these 200 people, or will they drop down and then move back up again?
I'm curious about like the dopamine hit of having a good performance in like a relatively less saturated field. That would be like the one thing I could see people like wanting to stay in the 200 realm, where it's still establishing its level of competition and like notoriety. So like we mentioned at the top of the episode, perhaps you can kind of keep being a big fish in a smaller sea for a bit longer.
It's called opportunity.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Well, Leah, I got a hypothetical for you. Yeah. Now that you're officially not starting this year's edition of Cocodona, if you had won this race and like beaten Courtney Dauwalter and everyone else straight up, would you retire from 200s, or would you then immediately do more?
I think I would not immediately do more. Like I would never be one of those people that is doing like the Triple Crown of these in a calendar year. I just like couldn't.
Or even like one the next year.
I think I would do one the next year. However, I feel like if you were to beat Courtney Dauwalter at something, like just stop there.
Wouldn't you just write the book and retire?
Yeah, I think I would. I think I actually would. That's a great question, though.
The only concern I have for like making a home in this space, if you're an aspiring pro or a pro, is that at least on the American scene, the only 200 plus mile race that really provides like the media coverage that we expect for the sport is Cocodona. And like that's the only supply. It's like a one of one. It's like after Cocodona, like like Moab is cool, Bigfoot's cool, but Tahoe's cool, but like there's just a massive drop off in like displaying yourself there and like having an audience to like consume your performance,
That's a good point. And another thing that came to mind too was like brand incentive structures. During my contract negotiations this year, this was the first time I saw Cocodona written into multiple contracts. Mm-hmm.
How high up, if you don't mind?
I like definitely not the highest tier with like UTMB Western States.
Like a B tier?
Yeah, it'd be like a B tier. Yeah, maybe along the lines of like a golden ticket race here in the US. But yeah, across like multiple brands, not just like the shoe brand, but nutrition and like accessories and things like that. And like maybe it was because it was listed as one of the races I was doing this year that we added it in, but brands are familiar with it and it's present in contracts. So I think once that happens, it becomes slightly more desirable for people who are competing in other areas of the sport.
Yeah, that is very cool. Like if you were to tell a sponsor, a future sponsor, like I'm planning on running Cocodona, and their answer is cool instead of why.
Yeah. No, totally. It's like, that's awesome.
Yeah. Finn, you actually did bring up a really good point about just like being a professional in the space of 200s, where it's like you already don't have that many opportunities to perform in a professional space of hundreds, let alone 200s.
Right.
So then that got me thinking, it's like, well, there's some like Michael Versteeg, for example, like he races 200s, but it seems like he's a professional athlete for Satisfy for so much more than just racing 200s, which is something that we definitely see across a lot of ultra running, where it's like, Arlen's like the only person that comes to mind who's like no social media, no anything, but then like has a professional contract for racing ultras. Everyone else has other obligations, and maybe as these 200s do get more popular, like if you're winning Cocodona, maybe it's I'm going to race this, but also we're going to do these training docuseries. I'm going to go to more event. You have more time to do non-race sponsor obligations, which I don't know, maybe worse, maybe better, depending on who you ask.
I know I just said that the only spotlight in this scene is Cocodona, but I should acknowledge that we have Mammoth 200 is a new race, and that's under Tim Tollefson and Hillary Yang's leadership. And I have to imagine, I don't know if there's going to be a live stream this year, but I have to imagine, just given their track record, that they'll build that race to the point where it's like, if you want to be seen, if you want to compete with like the best in the arena, like they're going to create a space, the fall equivalent for this. So that's exciting too, I guess.
Yeah, and I would say too, just to clarify for any of our international listeners, I feel like when we are speaking about these, we're speaking kind of about
American,
the American.
Tour de Géance is American.
We're not talking about Tour. We know that race is massive and awesome.
Or the Gran Canaria 360 or whatever, or Swiss Peaks 360, whatever it's called.
Spine.
Yeah, the Spine.
Yeah, it's still just evolved. It's just a baby here in America.
It's also like its own thing, because when we just listed those variety of races that happen internationally, those are so different from what happens here on American soil, from at least my very outsider observation.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we have like on the men's side, we have like the Winter Spine champ coming over and racing Cocodona. Do I have that right?
Jack Scott. Yes.
Yeah. It would be really interesting to hear is like compare and contrast versus like.
Oh, they need a documentary on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leah, is it fair to say that is Courtney, is this is hers to lose, of course, but like 100%. is she gonna like are people gonna give her a run for her money, or is it kind of like a classic, well, I shouldn't say classic Courtney thing, but like how self-evident is her like victory here gonna be?
I think pretty self-evident. I think she just needs to keep her body and self together. I think she will be battling for the overall win. I think we'll see her in a similar position in that like podium contention overall, 100%. If not winning, I definitely think she will be 1, 2, or 3. Yeah, one of those positions.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because the only runner in either field that I think is maybe better than her is Dan Green, maybe.
Yeah, but Courtney's proven over 100+ mile distances. Like, do you know if Dan has any experience over 100 miles?
Or maybe not over 100.
There's actually a lot of guys in the men. I mean, okay, if we're like placing them generationally correctly, like Ryan Sands in his prime was like, he won Western States. He's incredible, right?
Yeah.
Although not as fast as Courtney.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but time-wise,
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, so So we've mentioned Georgia, Lindsay, Courtney.
And then we have our slew of veterans coming to the field this year. So we have Rachel and Trekken, who won last year in 73:30 roughly, and then she's been undefeated in every race that she has done since then. So she did across the years. I know, she's awesome. I feel like she nails a lot of the hundreds that she does, and she does quite a few hundreds. And I think she does them often like unsupported without crew and pacers too.
And so that was training out of LA. She's recently moved to Colorado.
Yes.
Has been getting like mountain things now.
Yes. Something I thought that was cool is she did across the years 48 hour this past winter, and she PR'd her 100K, 100 mile, and 24 hour there, and then PR'd her 48 hour by about a half mile.
Oh my gosh. So you're telling me she's done a previous 48 hour?
Can you imagine coming within a half mile? Or like at least she got her PR.
Yeah,
there, but,
being on the correct side of that.
Oh, that would be sad. So I feel like she had a great race here last year. Steady. A lot happened in the women's field that was interesting that maybe Finn, you could speak to last year with some of the lead changes. But Rachel ended up taking the lead later in the race, and I think has just like kind of doubled down on this distance since then, like doing a lot of 100 miles. She just did the Whiskey Basin 90K a few weeks ago. Crushed it. Did awesome. So I feel like she's really focusing on this one.
Yeah, I listened to her interview on Distance to Empty, and I think one of the big things that she acknowledged was like, look, I'm going to skate where the puck is going. I can see where this is headed. I'm going to need to run more this coming year to stay in contention. Courtney's in the race, Lindsay's in the race, etc. So I think she's been doing more running. I think she knows that like there probably will have to be a strategy change if she wants to stay up at the front. I actually we were kind of in the same orbit through most of the race. I saw her around Deer Pass last year. I think around Crown King. There was just a lot of different sections. We were kind of like leapfrogging throughout. And yeah, she's a tough runner. I think I put her in that category of like, I don't know exactly where she's going to finish, but I'm pretty confident she's going to finish fairly high. I put Sarah Ostazuski in that same category where it's like former champion, like knows how to run in like sub 3 days here, really dependable, like loves the course. I don't necessarily have her in contention for the win, but like could totally see her on the podium if she just runs a smart race.
Yeah. It's like if Courtney falters in any way, it's like Rachel, Sarah, and then like Mika Dews was one of the more exciting, has been one of the more exciting 200-mile racers in like many years. Like one of the, like what I would definitely consider like 200-mile specialists. She races a lot, but is also very competitive in them.
Yeah.
And I like her approach last year versus 2023 was pretty different. Whereas last year she just like fully sent it and was just quite on the wrong side of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a similar approach with just, some tweaks in the latter stages of the race to not end up, because when people like I thought for a while that there was word that she had dropped because she was at, what was it, Eldon or a previous aid station for so long.
Walnut Canyon.
Canyon. Like for so long where they're like, oh, she's definitely done. But then was not done and came back to life and still finished, which is super cool.
Went to a hotel, slept, came back, still got third.
Yeah, exactly. Like the days of that are done in 200s. But
are you allowed to do that? Like, have they written in any new?
It's in the runner guide. You can. Yeah, you just have to go back to the place that you left the course.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah. Well, there are people like towards the back of the pack. There are people that basically like they have a plan to do Cocodona in 5 days, and they'll hike 50 miles, and then they'll, for example, arrive in Prescott, have a great steak dinner, get an Airbnb, hop on the course the next day, hike another 50, and just like section it all the way to Flag.
Okay.
Interesting.
I could Cocodona that way.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe
It's
like
not bad.
like
I'll do it.
actual Cocodonuts. All right.
Mika's fast though, by the way. Like I was just pulling up some of her workouts. Like she's definitely done a lot of like eccentric work downhill. Like she's pretty fast. So I wouldn't count her out.
And I
She's
think,
fast
I
enough.
mean, I don't know if she shares everything on her Strava, but she seems to be, if she shares everything, she trains in like the reasonable boat. Similar to what you were discussing early on, Finn, of like that 50, 60, 70 miles, 10, 11, 12 hours a week. Kind of that sweet spot that you see a lot of like 100K runners training in. So it'd be cool if she shares everything, because that's pretty inspiring that you can be on the podium of Tahoe and Cocodona as many times as she has, kind of putting in training like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I learned through racing 200s that I didn't quite need to practice the durability part in training, I would 100% drop that and just work on getting fitter, which you can easily do in 10, 11 hours.
Yeah.
You know, and we've seen that across like some of the like serial racers, like 2010, 2011, where it's like they're racing every single month, but then just like not doing a ton of training in between. It's like maybe there's some mixture there for 200-mile stuff.
Yeah.
Leah, who are your podium picks?
I've got Courtney for the win. Got Lindsay Dwyer in second place and Rachel and Trekken in third.
Okay.
Where do you have Courtney overall?
Second.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do. So my hot take is she's going to beat the women's field by like 8 hours.
What about, do you have a predicted finish time for Courtney?
I'll predict one right now.
Okay.
So the women's CR as written on Ultra Sign Up right here is by Annie Hughes, 71 hours, 10 minutes.
Which that was the significant course change year, right?
Yeah, and then Eliza LaPierre, in 2023 ran 77 hours.
I think Sarah O's time is the time to beat.
Okay. Well, Eliza beat her that year. Is that true, or is that written incorrect? Oh no, that's written incorrectly.
No, there's
Sarah
some weird thing going on with Ultra
I
Sign
see
Up.
that. Yeah, I saw that all day today.
You have
actually.
to like, yeah.
Sarah O 7250 in 2023. So I think Courtney will run honestly 8 hours faster than that. I think Courtney will be 64 something, which would put her in the historic men's list.
So I say the time again for Courtney.
I think Courtney's going to be 64:30.
64:30. Okay.
Yeah. Write that down.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. 64:30. Okay. Gosh, I have her. Well, I'll hold off on my prediction.
Okay. Should I go next?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In third, I have Mika Thews. Second, I have Rachel and Trekken, and then I've got Courtney winning the whole thing.
Ooh, nice.
I think Courtney's just going to win the whole thing. I think we can dive in on the men's side how I think that'll shake out.
Surely that's what she wants to do. Like, it's not like she's coming here to like,
well, she's probably going to say like she just wants to see how good she can do. But it's like Kevin, her husband, has written splits down for
64:30.
You will win the whole thing. Well, I said even faster than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I said Courtney breaks the course record by 10 plus hours.
Wow.
So I'm thinking like 61, 62-ish for
Okay.
Courtney.
Oh my gosh.
Especially because of this good weather
right
now. I'm thinking because of this weather.
That's true.
Like, we don't get that heat slowdown. Courtney's lives in Leadville. Like, even if it's cold out there, like it'll still be great for her.
Dude, and that's only if she runs that's like 2.5 days. So she's done Wednesday night.
Yeah, the faster you go. Yeah, I know. She's going to see this. I think this start time of this race is going to need to get changed at some point, because we're going to start seeing these super dumb like Wednesday night finish times for a while. So I guess theory, run faster, go Wednesday like late afternoon.
If she ran 60 hours, that would, which I think is a little hefty. That would have her finishing 5 p.m. Wednesday, but very reasonably will finish before midnight Wednesday into Thursday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which would
So
be
5
67 or
p.m.
less.
Wednesday finish. That's fantastic. That's prime time. I can watch that.
Yeah.
And I totally see that. I could see that happening. That feels actually realistic to me. I mean, that would be a great A+ day for Courtney, but just like seeing what she's done before and just continuing to like blow expectations out of the water. It's like, I don't know.
I have Courtney for the win. I have her for the overall win, and I guess I'm crazy because I have her running 57:45.
Oh dang! Okay.
Okay. There we
you
go.
were going to say like 68 or something.
No. I have her running 57:45. I think we get a Grand Raid Mount Fuji-esque performance out of Courtney here.
A 2023 Western States.
Yeah.
Or is that worth even faster?
Yeah. I think Courtney is the second best overall runner we've ever seen here. I think the best to date has been Joe McConaughey. And I don't think Joe has gotten his potential out of this race, but I think she's the next best we've ever seen. And the current course record is, in the mid 59s. And I think she can take an hour and 30, 45 minutes off that.
I mean, I guess she did that.
Courtney doesn't really
she did that at States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think her fatigue resistance is legendary. She's just amazing. So I've got her in first. And then basically I have two like separate races within the race going on. I've got this days-long race between Mika, Georgia, and Lindsay. I have Mika winning that battle. She finishes in second. There's carnage amongst the rest of them. Then I also have this sub-battle between Sarah O and Rachel. And I have Sarah O winning that battle. Sarah finishing in third.
That's cool.
And I do think there's a fairly wide spread here, although I do think the entire podium is like under course record. So I see Sarah running like 68. I see Mika running like 64.
Okay.
And Courtney really low. Yeah,
I said CR to get on the podium. So it's like everyone in that top three is sub 71 hours.
Men's field.
Men's field's interesting.
Super interesting.
There's, I guess with the women's field too, there's a lot of overlap, that Venn diagram of like 100-mile and shorter type people. And then your 200-mile, because there's some veterans of Cocodona that are not just like veteran finishers, they're like veteran, like top finishers.
Yes.
And there's a ton of the top 10 returning from last year, which I thought was cool because I was like, oh, there's 2 in the top 5. And then I was like, well, what if I go to 10th? And then it was like 6th, 7th, 9th, and 10th are all coming back, as well as, Michael McKnight, who did not finish last year, but won the year before. So, yeah. And okay, Finn, maybe you could talk a little bit about Harry Suberta's background in this sport, because I saw he just ripped a good 50K not too long ago. Salmon Fall, he ran like 3:30 something. Like it's a pretty runnable 50K, but like I don't care if it's flat. Like that's pretty quick for like midway through
second
Cocodona.
Fastest time on that course, and like only second to a Cody Lynn time.
Yeah. And like assuming that's somewhat midway through Cocodona training, so it's like, is he a runner or a hiker?
I think he's an incredibly talented athlete, super humble, and I don't think he's on Strava, so it's really hard to know exactly what he's doing in training in the lead up to this. Prolific multi-day racer last year, went beyond the Triple Crown. He was doing Cocodona, Tahoe. Why am I blanking on the
Moab.
Washington one? Yep, and then Moab, and like won everything except for Moab, and just had this like blow up super late on day 3 to lose it to Max Jolliffe. But yeah, like incredibly talented. It's just hard to know where he's at because you only see any product on race day. There's no hints at like what's coming, and I think that's part of why he was slept on going into last year's race. Is like in this day of age where you can find people on Strava and like have a sense of what's coming. There was a mystery there.
And did he have any results of that magnitude prior to Cocodona last year?
I think I think he was like rising. I mean, if you go back and look at what he had done, like he had won the Tahoe 200 back in 2022. Ran 20 and a half hours for an 8th place finish at Run Rabbit. But like, I would not say one crazy mountain.
But last year.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But I wouldn't say, like, looking at those results, it would have been hard to say that translates to doing what he did at Cocodona this past year.
Yeah, I mean,
I would say Cocodona was a breakthrough.
Yeah, like it's one thing to be able to just be durable enough to, do the Triple Crown of 200s plus Cocodona, but it's another thing to do Cocodona, like win Cocodona in a course record time. And after watching the chase, it seemed like one of the things that he did, and Finn, maybe you'll be able to analyze this a little bit more, which kind of goes against everything we just said at the beginning, was like, it really seemed like he ignored the hoopla and just did his own thing and then just slowly crept up through the field.
Right.
Like, is that true?
So I went back and looked at the live tracking splits, and I don't know how accurate these were. And again, because I wasn't up there, I don't have any like primary experience, but it looked like he was sort of there all along. Like even at Crown King, he got there like in time with Jeff, Arlen, Joe, that whole lead crew. Like he was within plus or minus 10 minutes of that group, if you believe the historical splits from each of the aid stations last year. So a little bit of a mystery to me too, like the way that the film presents it, like he kind of comes out of nowhere, on the Coconino Plateau in those last 30 to 50 miles. But it also looks like he was kind of within striking distance or like relatively with them like the whole time.
So he just got kind of slept on the live stream
a little bit,
or like incorrectly. Like he got Jeff Colted.
Exactly. So,
well, that won't happen again.
He will be like, one of the
He's
crown
dude. Yeah. That's super interesting because pressure is it works in weird ways. Like it's not just him coming back and running Cocodona again. He's like the defending champ, the course record holder, the dude who spoiled the party last year.
Yeah.
Now he's the dude with the target on his back. How does he race this race now? Because it's very different.
I think he races it similarly, honestly.
Like, but can he do that now that everyone knows who he is? Like, can he just like if he goes out slower than like people in front of them, will they make sure they don't put too much time on him because therefore we must be going too fast? Or is it like just no respect for him and people are just like, oh, I'm just going to do it. He won't catch me.
Maybe. What was the reason for his blow up at Moab?
It's not entirely clear to me. If in the King of Moab movie, Max talks about just like seeing him on the side of the trail, and I think he was just exhausted, like he was taking a dirt nap, and his pacer said that he just like needed moments to recollect himself, and he ends up finishing second place
in the Triple Crown.
The last one, yeah.
So I'm assuming you probably made some passes last year while people were taking naps as well. Do you use those as opportunities of like vulnerability to like? Is that the equivalent of putting a surge on someone during a much shorter race when you're like, let's see how much time I can put on this person in this span of time, even if you're at mile 220?
So this is really interesting. In my experience, it was super melodramatic because even though I think I moved from like 33rd place into 7th by the end, but I only remember passing 2 people, Rachel and this guy, Jonathan, on top of Eldon. I think most of the people that I passed were like in their campers or their tents or their vans taking a nap somewhere. And you're like looking at an aid station. There's a bunch of cars in the parking lot. You can't pick out one from the other. You just assume that like somewhere in that sea of vehicles, there's like 3 runners.
Yeah.
I never really got that like pleasure of like making like defiant passes and feeling progress. It happened like 2 or 3 times in 2 days.
Wow.
That's kind of frustrating how that can happen in a race.
Yeah.
I remember that happened at 2015 States when I was pacing Laney, and I paced him the last 20 miles, and I think he moved up from like 11th or 10th to 8th. But from Forest Hill to Green Gate, he had also moved up a couple spots. But of the like 6 spots he moved up, he only passed one person on the
Oh.
trail.
Mhm.
Everyone else was just sitting in aid stations, and he was pretty bonked at that point. And like, he didn't notice that those people were racers. And then I like told him, I was like, hey, you just moved into 8th. And he was like, how? And I was like, no, dude, you just passed that French guy, which ended up, dude, okay, now I'm just embarrassed that I'm forgetting his name. But yeah, that's kind of a bummer to like not get to
Experience
like,
it.
yeah, like, or like kick a little dirt on them as you go by.
I'll say this. This is kind of how I'm like broadly viewing the men's field. There's basically, from like an athleticism, raw talent standpoint, there's two runners that I'm sort of bowing down to, and that's Harry and Dan Green. And then there's sort of like the eternal respect runners like Ryan Sands and Jesse Haynes. I don't really know how the chips are going to fall for them, but they've got storied pasts. Ryan began his career in the sport as a multi-day guy, won Western. He's honoring the course by going out there training right now. I don't know where he's at, but like have to honor it. And then I think the rest of the top of the field, it's like sort of this proving ground thing. It's like, show me. Like Max Jolliffe wins Moab, but like if you look at the time, kind of won it in like a Mike McKnight way where like it looks like a lot of it was hiking. You've got Jack Scott won the Spine, but again, like in what fashion? Is he ready to run? Versteeg, like in my opinion, one of the ultimate talents, and it really comes down to like motivation and logistical execution. But like if he executes there, he could be right at the top. McKnight, he's been doing running training. We'll see if that translates this time around. DJ Fox. So like there's like 10 people in the shadows that I think are like in that like show me state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everything I think is dictated around Harry and Dan.
Do you think Dan, I haven't, I was like, it feels like Dan is kind of the Arlen Glick of this field, where he's like very fast, very good at running. I'm curious how if he'll model his race at all after Arlen and try and maybe correct some of the reasons that you had said earlier about why Arlen didn't win the race.
Right. I think that's a great point. I know he's a student of the sport. I know he's taking this seriously. He has to be looking at Arlen as a case study for like what to do, what not to do.
Yeah. You know, it's also, he's, what is he, 10 spots off the top of the Western States waitlist right now?
Yes.
And Harry's in States.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, I should have known that. I watched the whole States lottery, but oh wow, so the Coco States double is like a real thing right now. Yeah. That's cool.
So, Leah, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I don't. Dan Green, he is so interesting to me. Luckily, he just accepted my follow on Strava today, so I can creep on him in real time. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, his training's been awesome. He's another guy that's been putting in like 160-mile weeks of combo of walking and running, and yeah, no cycling to be found. Yeah, like a few weeks ago, a 24-hour week of training, a 25-hour week of training, and largely all in his hometown of Huntington, West Virginia. So like pretty monotonous miles, I'm sure, but it looks like he's gotten out on some good training runs on some trails as well, but seems to be taking it seriously. Like you mentioned early on, I think he's one of those guys that hasn't been out for longer than 100 miles before. He does have a few under his belt, like his third place at Javelina, and then a few back in the Midwest, like the Rim to River 100. But those don't have him on his feet for a very long time. Like he's a fast guy. He's running all of this, usually under 16 hours for all of these hundreds. And I do think he did that 100 that was in like Pennsylvania, this block, that Rabid Raccoon one, I want to say.
And Blankenship did that one too, yeah.
Yeah, and I think he set a good course record running somewhere in like the 17-hour time frame. So I think going over 17 hours is definitely foreign territory for him. And I'm curious how he'll handle all of the controllables and logistics that the race throws at him. But I think on paper is significantly faster than Arlen and will be bringing that speed to this race.
I love that. And that's why I think for the rest of the field, it's a high floor for me. Like, I don't think if Max Jolliffe, for example, doesn't compete for the win, I don't think he's placing that much lower off the podium. Like, he's got experience here. He's tough. Same thing with Jeff Garmeyer. All he's done is gotten better each year he's been at Cocodona. Versteeg, like I think I do predict like a year where the floor is relatively high for the majority of the field and we don't see too much crazy movement, especially with the news that the weather is okay in the first 50K. I had come into this episode thinking, oh man, like there could be a lot of carnage, but I think the weather is going to help hold things steady too.
Yeah, I think especially for the people that are running under 72 hours, like how the weather is right now, perfect for 3 days. Like absolutely perfect.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Like, yeah, because I was also kind of thinking we would see some carnage. Like, I was thinking kind of almost more like Courtney-induced carnage, where like there will probably be a large pack of men trying to hang with Courtney. And while I do still think a large percentage of that pack is going to explode, perhaps less though than normal. Because it's like, oh, well, Courtney's Courtney. Like, if I just do what she does, then I must be in good hands. Well, it's like, well, maybe only Courtney can do
what
Courtney things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think in terms of like, if we had to like I wrote down like, it was always like one person on the men's field, one person's on the women's field. That kind of like changes the whole race dynamic. It's like, I think Courtney is the answer for both sides of like the men's field and women's field in terms of just like making the race dynamic interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just looking at Courtney's results here and some of these, like some of the races she's done over the years. When she won Western States in her course record time, she was 6th overall. And I'm just like thinking like relative to somebody like Dan Green and Max, like where would these guys be finishing?
Are they getting 6th?
Yeah, exactly. And then at Trans Gran Canaria, she was 7th overall. At Bandera, she was 6th overall. Hard Rock 4th. Hard Rock again 4th. So at Fuji 3rd. Like she's up there and she is in the mix, and like every single one of those guys that we mentioned is contending with her. But honestly, I think this is a slightly less competitive field than she's encountered in some of those bigger races I just mentioned, and the worst placement she has is 8th overall.
Yeah, it's like physically it might only be like Dan Green, because he's in like his prime athletic years, whereas like maybe if this was Ryan Sands like 6 years ago, that would be the case. And I feel like Ryan didn't race much in 2024, did he?
No, he did not. He had, I think, a few small results, and then he has not done much lately. I know he ran UTMB the year that I did, and I think that was a DNF, but not a ton.
Cape Town as well in 23. But like maybe that's not a bad thing though.
Yeah.
To like pump the brakes on racing, because that's oftentimes the just biggest problem with sponsored athletes is they just kind of over race and get stuck in this rut of subpar races. And so maybe this could have been like this past year could be the racing reset that gives Ryan Sands the opportunity for a really good day here at Cocodona. Because it's like, I mean, at this point in the race's history, or this distance's history, like it being into your 40s, not a problem. I mean, Jeff Browning was in his early 50s and just about won the thing last year. So by that standards, then Ryan is a little young whippersnapper. No offense to Jeff. Don't beat me up.
Can I give you my predictions?
Let's hear them.
Got a couple things to say. I believe the whole top 10 runs under 64 hours. And the major takeaway from this year's Cocodona is that, and I say this with regret because I am one of these people, through hikers go extinct. You cannot through hike your way into anything in this race anymore. Dan Green wins it in 58.15. He finishes in second to Courtney. Harry finishes second in the men's race, 58.30. And Jack Scott finishes third in 59.05. Quick note on Jack. So he won the spine. And there's been all this awesome reporting about just like the lengths that he's gone to prep for this race. Training in Spain to mimic sort of the desert-like conditions of Cocodona, doing all this work with universities over in the UK that work with, their national Olympic level marathoners. He's really pulling out all the stops to treat this seriously and take it as far as he possibly can in terms of prep. So yeah, I was debating between Jack and Max Jolliffe for that third position, and I'm going Jack because I do think Max has worked incredibly hard and he's put in like Dan Green levels of work, but it was just a coin flip for me.
Mine parallels yours minus I chose Max instead of Jack.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't know why. Just felt good about Max, felt good about his Moab 240 performance.
He's
Feel
got a
like
bit of
he's been
momentum
playing.
on his side.
He ran a good Black Canyon 50K. He was not far behind our fast media guy here, Brett, in the 50K. So
it's because Brett was wearing the 5s.
It was all right. It was all right.
So I think he's got some leg speed too, and I'm curious if he's been working on that at all with this block. So I think that'll definitely help propel him forward.
How about times? Do you think are they running faster, slower than Courtney? What are you thinking?
I think so. I said Courtney was going to get second overall. I think Dan Green will beat Courtney, but I think it'll be kind of like a Kyle Curtin situation. I think Dan will beat her by no more than 1 hour. So I think he'll be low 60s. I don't think anybody's breaking 60 hours, I guess, was my take on this year's race.
Okay.
And then Harry will be 1 hour behind Courtney. And then Max will be 1 hour behind Harry. So a decent separation that we're not having any of the nail biters that we had last year, except for maybe the Courtney Dan Green battle up front.
Cool. Okay, I like those.
I have Dan, Max, and Harry in my podium, but in different orders.
Oh, nice.
But I'm also now I'm rethinking my times because I said Courtney was going to win the whole thing, but I said she would only break the women's record by 10 hours, which then puts Courtney at like 61. Yeah. And that now means like the entire of everyone in this men's field, like all of them are going to be slower than 61. Like that then means this cold weather is getting less than ideal, which maybe that could happen. We saw that at Canyons this past weekend where like the cooler weather seemed to just like torch some people in the same way hot weather does, where like some people burn a lot of matches trying to stay warm. So I guess then I'll just commit to my times then being a little bit slower than last year.
I might revise mine because you bring up a good point, but yeah, go on.
Okay. I've got Dan Green in third, which I guess is fourth overall, just because, man, this is a lot. This is 2.5 times longer than the longest he's raced. And there's a big learning curve to that. Like, I mean, I feel like there's a decent learning curve going from 100K to 100 miles. We're going from 100 miles to 250 miles. Yeah. That's like a different universe of uncomfortable chafing. So I've got Dan Green in third. I got Max in second. And I think Harry is going to repeat and win. But he won't be the first person overall to cross the finish line because I think that's going to go to Courtney. And I guess committing to my old times, it won't be a course record on the men's side.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks as always. This was a fun preview of the Cocodona 250, and we'll see kind of where our picks land. And I don't know, any final thoughts, Leah, Brett, before we go?
I had one final thought. I just wanted to.
I did as well. Probably
define the French man that Brett was trying to talk about earlier, and
oh my gosh,
sure it was Francois.
It was Francois Dane, and I was just gonna let that go to the wayside. Thank you, Leah, for letting everyone know that I
results, and I was like, please tell me he wasn't talking about France.
Dude, I just could not. You'd think even me after saying like France that I would have Francois, like that's what it was. He was sitting at like Green Gate with just this giant 12-pound ice block on his head and just thinking it was so funny that he had his little bucket hat on top because he was just like, I'm so fried right now. And I was like, who's this guy? Turns out he's pretty good at running. Finn, good luck. I don't want to tell you. I'll tell you after the race how I predicted your finish because I don't want to, insider trading and all that good stuff. But
I will try my best. That is what I'll guarantee.
Yeah, I think you're ready for a good one. I think the tweaks that you've made to your training have been for the better, and like I said, with the learning curve, like year 1 to year 2, if you just stop less, you knock 6 hours off your time and still get a good amount of stoppage time.
If and stop less.
Stop
Easy.
less.
It's just stop less.
Stop less.